The trainer's open palm shoved Jason Statham square in the chest, pushing him back 2 full steps on the gym floor. "This section's for serious athletes, mate. The treadmills are over there for the weekend warriors." Statham didn't stumble. He planted his feet, looked down at the hand still pressed against his sternum, and then looked up into the eyes of a man who had no idea what he'd just started. What happened in the next 45 minutes would become London fitness legend, a story whispered about for decades in every boxing gym, every MMA club, and every back alley training hall from Shoreditch to South Bank. But let me take you there properly, because this story is better than you think. It was a private gym in West London, not one of those glossy Instagram places with neon signs and smoothie bars. This was a raw space. Concrete floors, iron plates that had been dropped 10,000 times, chalk dust hanging in the air, and a cage in the back corner where guys actually fought. The kind of place where nobody cared about your name. They cared about what you could do. Jason Statham walked in wearing a gray hoodie, hood up, no entourage, no fanfare, carrying a beaten-up gym bag that looked like it had been through a war. He'd been traveling, filming overseas for months, and his usual training spot was closed for renovation. A buddy of his had recommended this place, said it was legit, said the owner was solid. What the buddy didn't mention was the head trainer. His name was Derek Holloway, 6'3", 230 pounds of muscle wrapped around an ego the size of Parliament. Derek had competed in strongman circuits across Europe, had a wall of certifications behind the front desk, and ran this gym the way a prison warden runs a cell block. His rules, his territory, his way. Believe me, there are guys in every gym like Derek. You know the type. The ones who peaked physically at 28, built their whole identity around being the biggest person in any room, and then spent the rest of their lives making sure nobody forgot it. Now here's what matters. Statham didn't announce himself. He didn't flash a credit card or drop his agent's number. He walked in, paid the day rate in cash, and headed toward the free weights section in the back. That was it. No drama. No celebrity treatment requested. He just wanted to train. Derek spotted him from across the floor, didn't recognize him, or maybe didn't care. What he saw was a lean guy, maybe 5'10", 175, walking toward the heavy equipment section where Derek's elite clients trained. The section Derek had roped off with actual chains, marking it as premium access only. Statham stepped over the chain. That's when Derek crossed the floor in 4 long strides, planted that palm on Statham's chest, and pushed. "This section's for serious athletes, mate. The treadmills are over there for the weekend warriors." Now get this. There were maybe 15 people in that gym. A couple of amateur MMA fighters wrapping their hands near the cage. A few powerlifters chalking up by the squat racks. 2 women doing kettlebell work near the wall. And every single one of them stopped what they were doing, because they'd seen Derek do this before. Run off anyone he didn't deem worthy. It was his power move. His little kingdom moment. Statham pulled his hood down. His jaw tightened. He set his gym bag on the floor slowly, deliberately, the way you'd set down a weapon you were choosing not to use yet. "I paid the day rate," he said, voice flat, not aggressive, not defensive, just fact. Derek crossed his arms and leaned back on his heels. "Day rate gets you cardio machines and the basic rack. This area requires a monthly elite membership, personal assessment, and my approval. You don't have any of those." Statham looked past Derek at the equipment. Olympic platform, competition-grade bumper plates, rings suspended from the ceiling, a rope climb anchored into steel beams. He looked back at Derek. "What's the assessment?" Derek grinned. Not a friendly grin. The kind of grin that said, "I already won this." "It's a physical evaluation. I run you through a gauntlet. Strength, endurance, flexibility, coordination. Takes about 20 minutes. Most people don't finish. If you can't hang, you can't train here. Simple." Here's what nobody tells you about Jason Statham. Before Hollywood ever came calling, before he was jumping off buildings and fighting entire rooms full of stuntmen on screen, this man was a competitive diver. Not recreational, not casual. He was on the British national diving team for 12 years. He competed at the Commonwealth Games. He trained at an elite level in a sport that demands insane body control, explosive power, flexibility, and the kind of mental discipline that most gym rats can't even spell. On top of that, He'd spent years training in kickboxing, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and mixed martial arts with some of the most respected coaches in the world, not for movies, for himself, because he was a genuine athlete down to the marrow. But Derek didn't know any of that. Derek saw a regular-looking bloke in a faded hoodie. Statham bent down, unzipped his bag, and pulled out his training gloves. He pulled them on, flexing his fingers into the leather. "Run it," he said. Derek blinked. Most people argued. Most people backed down, picked up their bag, and shuffled to the treadmills with their tail between their legs. This guy wasn't doing either. "Your funeral," Derek said, and turned toward the elite section. Two of the MMA fighters had drifted closer, arms folded, watching. One of them, a younger kid with cauliflower ears and tape still on his knuckles, nudged his training partner and muttered something. The other one shrugged. Derek grabbed a clipboard from a hook on the wall. He was making a production of this. Showtime. Station 1, pull-up bar, dead hang for 90 seconds, then 20 strict pull-ups, no kipping, no swinging. Full extension at the bottom, chin over bar at the top. Statham walked to the bar without a word. He chalked his hands, jumped up, gripped it overhand, and hung. His body went completely still. Not a sway, not a twitch. 90 seconds. It might as well have been 90 years if you were watching and waiting for him to struggle. He didn't. I swear this happened. The man hung there motionless the way a steel beam hangs from a crane. 90 seconds passed. Derek checked his stopwatch and called it. Statham immediately pulled. 1, 2, 3. His form was mechanical, perfect, no momentum. Pure lat engagement, shoulder blades squeezing at the top, full lockout at the bottom. He hit 20 and dropped to the floor. Barely a deeper breath. Derek's jaw shifted sideways. Just barely. He scribbled something on the clipboard. Station 2. Olympic lifts, clean and jerk, body weight on the bar. Now this is where it starts to get interesting. Because body weight, clean and jerk is no joke for someone who hasn't been doing it regularly. It's a technically demanding movement. You can be strong as an ox and still fail it if your form is garbage. Statham walked to the platform. He loaded the bar himself. Didn't ask for help. Plates sliding on, collars locked. He stepped up, set his feet, and pulled. The bar came off the floor, accelerated past his knees, hit his hips, and flew. He caught it in the front rack position, dipped, and drove it overhead in one seamless motion. Locked out. Held it. Lowered it. Clean. Textbook. Done. One of the powerlifters by the squat rack let out a low whistle. Derek shot a look in his direction that could have cut steel. The guy went back to chalking his hands. "Again," Derek said. Statham did it again. Same precision. Same speed. 3 more. He did 3 more. 5 total. No misses, no hesitation. Every rep identical. Derek didn't write anything on the clipboard this time. He tapped the pen against the paper and stared at Statham with a look that was starting to shift from amusement to something else, something he wasn't used to feeling. This is the truth of it. Derek had run this assessment maybe 100 times. He designed it to break people, not to evaluate them honestly, but to humiliate anyone who challenged his authority. He'd stack the stations, increase the difficulty beyond reason, and when the person inevitably failed, he'd shake his head, say something like, "Maybe next year," and send them packing. It was a con, a power game dressed up as quality control. But Statham wasn't failing. "Station 3, Derek said, and his voice had lost that lazy confidence. "Rope climb, legless, twice, no rest between." The rope hung from the ceiling, 20 feet of thick manila fiber anchored into a steel I-beam. Legless rope climb means exactly what it sounds like. Arms only, no wrapping the rope around your legs for support. It's a brutal upper body test that most fit people can barely do once. Statham grabbed the rope and climbed. Hand over hand, body rigid, legs straight out in front of him in an L-sit the entire way up. He touched the beam at the top, lowered himself down with control, touched the floor, and went right back up again. 20 feet up, 20 feet down, 20 feet up, 20 feet down. He landed and looked at Derek. No showboating, no flex. Just that flat, calm gaze that said, "What's next?" Trust me on this. The energy in that gym had changed completely. The ambient noise of clanking plates and humming fans was still there, but nobody was training anymore. Everyone was watching. The 2 women with the kettlebells had moved closer. The MMA kid with the cauliflower ears was standing with his mouth slightly open. Derek flipped to a new page on his clipboard. His neck had turned red. That creeping flush you get when your body knows something your ego hasn't accepted yet. Gymnastic rings, he said. Iron cross. Hold for 5 seconds. Now hold on. This is where Derek overplayed his hand and didn't even know it. An iron cross on gymnastic rings is one of the most difficult static holds in all of fitness. It requires elite-level shoulder stability, tendon strength, and years of specific training. Even most CrossFit athletes can't do it. Derek was pulling this out because he assumed it was impossible. He assumed this was where the stranger would finally crack. He forgot one thing. He was dealing with a man who'd spent 12 years on the British diving team, where ring work, flexibility training, and gymnastics conditioning were part of the daily routine. Statham walked to the rings hanging from the ceiling. He gripped them, pressed himself up into a support hold, and then slowly, with terrifying control, spread his arms out to his sides until his body formed a perfect cross. His shoulders didn't shake. His face didn't twist. He held it. 1 second, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then he pulled back to the support position and dropped down. Mark my words, Derek Holloway's face at that moment was something every person in that gym would remember for the rest of their lives. His mouth was slightly open. The clipboard was hanging loose at his side. The pen had stopped moving 10 seconds ago. But here's the thing about ego. It doesn't surrender gracefully. It doesn't see evidence, process it logically, and adjust. Ego doubles down. Ego fights dirty. And Derek's ego was a cornered animal. He tossed the clipboard onto a bench and stepped forward into Statham's space. Close. Too close. The kind of close that isn't about assessment anymore. It's about intimidation. Cute party tricks, Derek said. But this is a fighting gym. All that gymnastics nonsense doesn't mean a thing when someone's actually coming at you. Statham didn't step back. He stayed exactly where he was. His hands hung loose at his sides. And you've been in a lot of fights, Statham said. Not mocking, genuinely asking. Derek's chest puffed up. I've trained champions, mate. I've produced fighters who've competed at the highest levels. I know what real combat conditioning looks like, and doing a pretty hold on some rings, isn't it? You need to understand something. Derek had now moved the goalposts 3 times. First, it was about membership access. Then it was about physical assessment. Now it was about fighting ability. Each time Statham passed the test, Derek invented a new one. That's what insecurity does. It keeps raising the bar not because the bar matters, but because losing is unthinkable. The MMA kid stepped forward. His name was Connor, 22 years old, 3 amateur fights, 1 semi-pro bout. He trained under Derek because Derek was the only game in his price range. But Connor had good eyes. He'd been watching Statham move for the last 15 minutes, and something about the way this stranger carried himself, low center of gravity, relaxed shoulders, weight always balanced, had tripped every alarm in his fighter's brain. Derek, Connor said, and his voice was careful. I think that might be... Shut it, Connor, Derek snapped without looking at him. He kept his eyes on Statham. So, you want to use the elite section? Show me something real. Get in the cage. The cage. 12 feet by 12 feet, chain-link walls, padded floor tucked into the back corner of the gym. It was used for sparring, light contact, technical work. There was a sign on the door that read protective gear required at all times. Statham looked at the cage, then back at Derek. You want to spar? I want to see what you've actually got. Anyone can do pull-ups and climb a rope. Let's see how you handle pressure. Let me be clear about something. What Derek was proposing was wildly irresponsible. An unsanctioned spar between a head trainer and a day pass guest with no medical forms, no referee, and no prior agreement. Any gym owner with half a brain would have shut it down immediately. But Derek was the head trainer and the practical authority in this building, and nobody there was going to tell him no. Nobody except, maybe, Statham. Protective gear? Statham asked. Derek waved his hand dismissively. Light contact, technical, just movement and positioning. Statham studied him for 3 full seconds. Then he pulled his hoodie over his head. And that's when the entire room recalibrated. Underneath that faded gray cotton was a physique that didn't belong on a weekend warrior. Lean, hard, defined muscle built for function, not aesthetics. Every movement visible under the skin. Traps, delts, a core that looked carved from hardwood, forearms roped with tendons, not the inflated gym mirror body that Derek maintained. Something different. something built by decades of actual physical discipline. Here's the part that kills me. Even now, Derek didn't recognize him. Or if he did, he was too deep in his own performance to acknowledge it. He kicked off his trainers, pulled on a pair of MMA gloves, and stepped through the cage door. Statham followed. He didn't put on gloves. He wrapped his hands quickly and efficiently with tape from his bag. The way someone wraps their hands when they've done it 10,000 times and don't need to think about it anymore. They stood across from each other in the cage. Derek bouncing on his toes, rolling his shoulders, making himself big. Statham still, feet shoulder-width apart, weight centered, hands low. Connor was standing outside the cage with his fingers hooked through the chain link. His training partner was beside him. The powerlifters had come over. The kettlebell women. Everyone was at the cage now. Derek moved first, a jab, more of a rangefinder than a real punch, thrown with about 40% power. Statham slipped it. Not a dramatic head movement, just enough. The punch went past his ear and hit nothing. Derek threw another jab, followed by a cross. Statham parried the jab with his left hand and stepped offline from the cross, pivoting to Derek's outside. He was now at a 45-degree angle to Derek's center line, and Derek had to reset his entire stance to face him. No, this is not a movie scene. This is real. This is what actual martial arts training looks like when it meets someone who only knows how to be big. Derek came forward harder this time. Combination: jab, cross, hook. 3 punches thrown with increasing intensity. Statham blocked the jab, rolled under the cross, and caught the hook on his forearm. As Derek's momentum carried the hook past its target, Statham stepped inside and tapped Derek on the ribs with an open palm. Light, almost gentle, but precisely placed on the liver. Derek's body flinched involuntarily. He knew what that was. Every fighter knows what that was. That was a message. That was Statham saying, "I could have ended this right here." "Lucky shot," Derek muttered, resetting. Connor, outside the cage, pulled out his phone and started recording. Derek changed tactics. He lowered his level, shot for a takedown. It was a decent double-leg attempt, the kind you'd see from a wrestler with some training. He drove forward, reaching for Statham's hips. Statham sprawled. His hips dropped, his legs kicked back, and suddenly Derek was bent over at the waist with Statham's weight on top of him, controlling the back of his neck with one hand. Derek scrambled, tried to circle, tried to come up, but Statham moved with him. Every direction Derek went, Statham was already there. It was like watching someone try to escape their own shadow. And I'm telling you, you could see the exact second the doubt hit Derek Holloway. Not in his words, in his body. His shoulders rose half an inch. His breathing changed from controlled exhales to short, choppy intakes. His eyes widened just a fraction. These are the signs that every fighter in that room recognized because they'd felt them themselves, in sparring, in competition, in the moments when they realized the person across from them was operating at a level they couldn't reach. Statham let Derek up, stepped back, gave him space. That was a choice. He could have taken the back, sunk in a choke, and put Derek to sleep on his own gym floor. He didn't. Derek stood up. His face was red. Sweat darkened the collar of his shirt. He pulled off one glove, wiped his forehead with the back of his hand, and put the glove back on. "Not bad," he said, but his voice had a crack in it now. "Listen to me carefully. This is the moment where a different kind of man would have pushed, would have humiliated Derek publicly, made a spectacle, given the crowd the knockout they were silently hoping for. Jason Statham is not that man. He never has been. What he did instead was something far more devastating than any punch. He dropped his hands to his sides, completely open, no guard. He looked at Derek and said very quietly, so only Derek and the people closest to the cage could hear, "You're strong, you've got decent instincts, but you're using all of that to scare people instead of building them up. That's a waste." Derek's hands dropped too, not because he chose to lower them, because he didn't know what to do with them anymore. Nobody had spoken to him like that, not with aggression, not with condescension, but with a directness that cut through every layer of bluster and performance and hit something underneath, something honest. "Who the hell are you?" Derek said, and for the first time, it wasn't a challenge, it was a genuine question. Connor, from outside the cage, cleared his throat. "Derek, that's Jason Statham." Dead silence. You could have heard a chalk pebble hit the rubber floor. Derek's face went through about 7 different expressions in 2 seconds. Confusion, recognition, disbelief, a flash of something that might have been anger but burned out before it caught, and then something that settled into his features and stayed there, something raw and uncomfortable and real. He looked at Statham, looked at the physique he'd dismissed, looked at the hands that had controlled him on the ground with almost casual precision, looked at the man he'd shoved in the chest and told to go use the treadmills. Now think about this from Derek's perspective for a second. He'd spent years building his reputation as the alpha of this gym. He'd chased away dozens of people he deemed unworthy. He'd turned his insecurity into a system of control that made him feel powerful, and in the space of 30 minutes, a man in a faded hoodie had walked through every barrier, passed every test, outperformed him in his own cage, and then, instead of destroying him publicly, had offered him something worse than a beating: the truth. Statham unwrapped his hands. He rolled the tape neatly, tucked it into his bag. He pulled his hoodie back on. The whole time, Derek stood in the cage, gloves still on, not moving. Then Derek did something nobody in that gym had ever seen him do. He pulled off both gloves. He walked to the cage door. He stepped out, and he extended his hand to Statham. "I owe you an apology," he said. His voice was thick. His jaw was tight. This was a man swallowing something that tasted terrible and knowing he had to do it anyway. Statham took his hand. Firm grip, brief. He nodded. And then, and this is the part that absolutely floors me, Statham said, "Show me the gym properly. I still need to train." That was it. 7 words, no victory speech, no "I told you so," no lecture about respect or recognition. He just wanted to train. That's all he'd ever wanted. Derek walked him through the entire gym, not as a gatekeeper this time, as a trainer. He showed him the equipment, the schedule, the layout. He introduced him to the regulars. His voice was different now, stripped of performance. Just a guy who knew his gym and was sharing it honestly. Connor told me later that it was the first time he'd heard Derek talk like a normal human being in the 2 years he'd trained there. Statham trained for 90 minutes. He used the elite section. He used the cage for shadow work. He used the rings, the ropes, the Olympic platform. He trained hard, quietly, methodically, and when he was done, he wiped down every piece of equipment he'd touched. He walked to the front desk where Derek was sitting. Derek stood up immediately. "What do I owe for the elite section access?" Statham asked. Derek shook his head. "Nothing. You earned it about 4 tests ago." And then something happened that changes the whole color of this story. Statham sat down across from Derek, just pulled up a chair and sat. He asked Derek about his strongman career, not polite conversation, real questions, what competitions he'd done, what his best lifts were, where he'd placed. Derek talked. At first carefully, the way you talk when you're still ashamed of how you acted 20 minutes ago. But Statham kept asking, and the questions weren't random. They were specific enough that Derek realized this man actually understood the sport, had actually followed it, respected it. 15 minutes into the conversation, Derek said something that cracked his own facade in half. "I stopped competing 4 years ago, tore my rotator cuff, tried to come back, couldn't get the numbers, so I started training other people. But I think somewhere in there I started punishing them for still being able to do what I couldn't anymore." Statham didn't respond right away. He just sat there, let it breathe. Then he said, "Injuries change you, but they don't have to make you smaller." Derek looked away. His eyes were wet. He blinked hard and turned back. "Yeah," he said, and that was all he could manage. "If you've been watching this far, if this story moved you, if you felt something shift in that cage the way everyone in that gym felt it shift, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Ring the bell. Because these are the stories that matter, the ones where the real knockout isn't physical. I've got more of these. Stay with me. Here's what happened after." Connor's phone video went semi-viral. Not massively, not millions of views, but enough to circulate through MMA and fitness communities. The clip was shaky, shot through chain link, but you could see it clearly. You could see Statham slip the punches. You could see the sprawl. You could see that liver tap. And you could see, even through grainy phone footage, the exact moment Derek Holloway's world rearranged itself. The comments section was ruthless at first. People mocking Derek, calling him names, laughing at his expense. And then Statham did something unexpected. He contacted Connor through his management team and asked him to take the video down. Not for legal reasons, not for PR protection. In the message, passed through channels, Statham said he didn't want Derek to be publicly humiliated, that the man had apologized, that it was handled, that putting someone's worst moment on the internet forever wasn't something he was interested in being part of. Connor took the video down that same day, but the story didn't die. It just went underground. It became oral history. Gym lore. The kind of story that gets told between sets, during cooldowns, at fight camps, growing slightly different with each telling but always keeping the same core. A guy walked into a gym, got disrespected by the biggest ego in the room, passed every test thrown at him, outclassed the gatekeeper in his own cage, and then, instead of grinding the man into the dirt, offered him something better, a second chance to be decent. Derek Holloway changed after that day. Not overnight, not in some dramatic montage, but measurably. Connor told me the chain came down from the elite section within a week. The assessment process was restructured to be an actual assessment, not a hazing ritual. Derek started coaching differently, still tough, still demanding, but the cruelty was gone. About 6 months later, Derek got an envelope delivered to the gym, no return address. Inside was a card with a phone number and a short note. If you ever want to train together properly, call this number, no assessments required. The handwriting was sharp and neat. Derek never called. He told Connor he didn't feel he'd earned it yet, but he pinned the card to the wall behind the front desk, right next to his certifications, and it stayed there. I checked. As of last year, it's still there. Here's my final thought, and then I'll let you go. Everyone loves the stories where the hero throws the devastating punch, where the bully gets knocked out cold, where the crowd erupts. We're wired for it. We want the violent satisfaction, the clean ending, the moment of total domination. But the most powerful thing Jason Statham did in that gym wasn't the iron cross or the pull-ups or the clean and jerk or the sprawl or the liver shot. It was walking back to the front desk after all of that and pulling up a chair. It was treating a man who'd disrespected him like a human being who'd made a mistake, not a villain who deserved to be destroyed. That's not weakness. That's the kind of strength that can't be measured on any bar or in any cage. The legend isn't about what Statham did to Derek Holloway. The legend is about what he didn't do. He had every right, every ability, and every audience to break that man in half. He chose to sit down and have a conversation instead. And that, right there, is why Jason Statham isn't just an action star playing tough guys on screen. He's the real thing. And Derek Holloway? He'll tell you that himself. If you ever walk into that gym in West London, pay the day rate and head toward the back. He'll let you into the elite section. No chains, no clipboard, no games. He'll just ask if you need a spot. And if you look at the wall behind the front desk, between a Level 3 personal training certification and a faded photo from the 2011 Britain's Strongest Man regional qualifier, you'll see a small white card pinned with a single thumbtack. That card is the only trophy that matters in that building. And every person who trains there knows the story behind it. The legend contract is fulfilled. A man walked into a gym. A bully tried to break him, and the response left everyone speechless. Not with violence, not with ego, but with something far harder to pull off. Grace under pressure. That's the legend of Jason Statham and the West London gym. And now you carry it too.